LZX.
So here I have the basic workflow set up for the patch, and it's pretty standard except for two exceptions, which I'll get into shortly. But the backbone of the patch is the horizontal and vertical outputs from the visual cortex being brought into both of the bridges multiples. And it's really nice to have the vertical in one and the horizontal in the other, because you don't have to rely on a huge chain of stack cables to route these ramps throughout the system. I then have the horizontal and vertical ramps being brought into the inputs on the Navigator 1 and Navigator 2. And then Navigator 2, of course, is brought into the shape changer to create a shape. Now the shape changer is creating a square on the screen, but in the video at the beginning I had the symmetry dialed all the way down, and that just creates this extremely long distorted shape, and then I sort of faded it in as I changed the song. It's really nice to have live controls like this over a shape that are pretty easy to dial in. I'm taking the unkeyed output from the shape changer and I'm routing into the doorway, which is a linear keyer. And instead of taking the keyed output, it's nice to do this because it offers extra flexibility keying outside of the shape changer. For example, we have faders that can control how much we see in the shape. We have threshold, which right now is controlling the size of the shape to an extent, because I do have this switch in outline mode instead of solid mode. And then the gain, which is controlling the width of the shape. So I have the keyed output from the doorway being routed into the filter input on the curtain. And the curtain's a high pass filter, and you can see the different effects of it if you alter the shape knob here. But right now I have it dialed all the way to the right. And what's doing most of the work is this width control. And that sort of controls how much light you're seeing on the shape. So I like to kind of even that out. I then have the filter output routed into the bridges VCA. And I knew ahead of time that I wanted to utilize the bridges VCA because it's so nice to be able to fade shapes in and out using voltage control. You'll probably notice right off the bat this awesome counterclockwise morphing that's happening in our main shape. And this really cool effect is generated by this first navigator. I just have the shape being keyed by our other doorway, and then that output is being brought into the curve input on the shape changer. So we're essentially just injecting this shape into the shape changer. And you can see if I change the controls on the first navigator, you can move the effect around. You can change the X and Y on it, you can change its anchor, and of course if you move the first shape, it will do some similar morphing. Another thing you may notice is the background. There's a horizontal blue horizon in the background. That's created by a horizontally synced prismatic rays output being brought into the second input on the color chords. Pretty standard. You can create tons of lines or just one. I like to have just one in the background, gives some space to the composition. I've filled the A input on the fader with the multed output from the unkeyed shape on the shape changer. And essentially what we'll be doing is fading our affected doorway curtain shape into just the standard raw unkeyed shape. And we'll be doing that by using one of these audio envelopes, which is being generated off screen. And then I've routed that from this multiple into the VC on the bridge. And I'll show you really quick what happens when I trigger that envelope. So you can see that shape is just being faded from one to the other. It's a really subtle, nice effect. There's something fun being done here with the shape changer. I'm taking the keyed output from the shape changer, routing it into fader A, and then the vertical output from the shape changer, routing it into B. Those are then being faded by the envelope, and routed into the key input on the visual cortex. The purple background is a vertically synced prismatic ray that's being modulated by an out of sync prismatic ray. The output from the vertically synced prismatic ray is being brought into a mixer on the bridge, and then that also has a vertical output from the Navigator 1, which is causing it to rotate. There's also a vertical ramp from the visual cortex routed into the frequency on the vertically synced prismatic ray. That allows us to bend the vertical shape. We have that output from that mixer routed into a secondary mixer, which also has that unkeyed shape. We're seeing it again, brought into the mixer, then into the visual cortex channel A. This gives us a really cool effect of seeing this ghostly after image of the shape. Finally, I have a kick drum off screen with its trigger being routed into this multiple and then routed into the trigger input on the visual cortex. So every time the kick hits, it automatically fades between channel A and channel B. Ultimately with this patch, I wanted to offer a ton of control from the audio end, so that's why I have these audio envelopes being routed into the faders and triggers being routed into the visual cortex. I've included some patch diagrams in the video description. Thanks for watching.